Hello there, comic comrades, and welcome back to another nerd venture where we will continue our search for excellence in the field of graphic storytelling. Today, we will be speaking about the classic Thanos Saga of Jim Starlin, James P. Starlin, Jim Starlin, you may know him as. It is an exciting one, something that I have greatly enjoyed reading over the last couple weeks. So let's dive right into this bad boy and talk about who Thanos was and where his origins came from before he was the Marvel movie character that we know him to be now. First, though, a touch of housekeeping. Thank you so much to everybody who has submitted independent comics and small press stuff to the channel so far. Per my last video, I've been taking submission for review, for feature on the channel, to try to show a little bit more of the indie and small press world of comics. So please, if you're interested in that, shoot me a message at YouTube. You can just message me through the channel, or go to the Nerd Ventures Facebook page, which I will have linked down in the description. Shoot me a message through there, and I will get in touch with you. Physical copies are preferred. I'm finding it a lot easier just to read and do reviews with, but I will accept anything, but physical is what I prefer. So anyway, if you have a comic or know somebody who works on a comic or hang around a local comic shop that has people who produce independent work there, please consider submitting it to the channel, because it has been really fun for me so far to talk to people and get some books, some stuff that's really cool that's going to be coming up in future videos. So without further ado, let's get back to some thoroughly non-independent work, some Marvel Comics cosmic magic. So the man of the hour today, and by hour I hopefully mean under 20 minutes, let's see, cross my fingers, see what I can do. The man of the hour today is Jim Starlin, James Starlin, who you probably know if you are a comic reader and into Marvel cosmic stuff for his work on Thanos, the Infinity Gauntlet, he's on Infinity War, Infinity Aftermath, Infinity Crusade, Infinity Watch, Infinity Quest, everything, Infinity everything. So he's a very prolific cosmic comics writer. He also did work in, he wrote for Batman. He wrote the Death of the Family storyline, the kind of famous one where I believe Jason Todd's Robin character was killed. He's written and done a lot of things over his years in the comic book industry. But he's kind of an interesting character, at least his origins are to me, because he started in comic books professionally in the early to mid 70s. And this was a time when guys like him were starting in comic books who had grown up on the Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko kind of comics of the 50s and 60s. So it's kind of an interesting time. It's almost like the film brat movement. I don't know if it's called a movement technically, but guys like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, Brian De Palma, Francis Ford Coppola, a lot of filmmakers who, came of age in the 70s, who had been watching, Alfred Hitchcock and similar, I'm blanking on other big directors from their earlier time periods. But anyway, they had grown up with a generation previous to them who had done film as a living and who had made, this huge career out of it. Similarly, these people who were joining the kind of comics industry in the 70s grew up with guys like Ditko, Kubert, Jack Kirby, John Buscema, a ton of people who were around in the 60s and making comics professionally for a living. And then you have this young crop of upstarter guys who's coming in who are going to kind of be the next generation of creators and artists. Guys like Jim Starlin was obviously a pretty big one. Frank Miller would have been in that group, I'd say. Walter Simonson, somebody who came in and started working in Marvel Comics in the mid-70s. A number of other, there's a lot of other people that would do it around then. Those are just the names I'm thinking of off the top of my head. So Jim Starlin's kind of part of this wave of creators who are influenced by people who came before and who are going to take it into their own direction. And the thing that he most famously took in his own direction was the cosmic stuff that he was doing for Marvel. So pretty soon after his arrival in Marvel, he was allowed to work on some Iron Man issues. And in Iron Man 55, he introduced Thanos, as well as Drax the Destroyer, two people who would go on to be in the most recent Guardians movies. I figured this was a good time to talk about this stuff because it's on the brain of everybody. And after that introduction in Iron Man 55, he then spread his work across basically, more or less, two different characters that we see right here, Captain Marvel and Adam Warlock. kind of reinventing these characters which had already existed and shaping them into his own kind of avatars to pit against Thanos in this large, cosmic, big stakes, crazy space opera battle. It's really an interesting take that he's done on all this stuff, especially since it was relatively early in his career. You know, he had this kind of stuff put together and ready to go, and it's quite interesting. The themes that he touches on: death, life, chaos, order, being a sort of, like I said, an avatar, or like a god, or the principal example of death or life. Thanos being the principal example of death, Adam Warlock being the principal example of chaos and life. It's a lot of stuff that he puts into this, and I think it's definitely worth tracking down and reading before you check out Infinity Gauntlet or any of the more modern Marvel Cosmic stuff. It's just a cool way to get some of the information about these characters, some of their backstory, and also all of the art and composition is absolutely stunning. So let's talk a little bit about the collections themselves. Now here's the main bitch of reading this stuff. This all came out between, I think, about 1976 to like 1982, depending on how you want to finish off your Starlin Cosmic run, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's not very well collected, or at least it's not smartly collected. What I have right here is the complete collection for Captain Marvel and the complete collection for Adam Warlock, both, complete collections by Jim Starlin. So there is other content for Adam Warlock and there's other content for Captain Marvel, which is not done by Starlin, which has either been sporadically collected or not well collected. Either way, today we're only going to be talking about Starlin stuff with these characters, with what I would kind of call the Thanos Classic Saga. So there are these two trade paperbacks. That is one option. But really, to get the full story, you would need 3 trade paperbacks, which is kind of where it becomes a pain in the ass. To get the full, true Jim Starlin, complete everything that he did in the 70s and 80s in the cosmic Marvel Universe, you would need a trade that's called Avengers vs. Thanos, and you would need these 2 complete collections of Captain Marvel and Adam Warlock. You could get by with just Avengers vs. Thanos. That would be totally fine. The problem with that, in my mind, is that that trade is very literal when it talks about Avengers versus Thanos, in the sense that there are stories in here which involve Captain Marvel, Warlock, and the larger cosmic Marvel universe, but not directly involving Thanos. Like, Thanos might not appear in an issue or 2 here. And those issues are left out of the Avengers versus Thanos trade. Because, as it says, that trade is exclusively focused on Avengers versus Thanos. So what I've done basically is I've kind of skipped the Avengers vs. Thanos stuff, because the things that it collects outside of these 2 are sort of like a couple issues of Daredevil where Thanos and a woman named Moondragon come into the picture. It's not really that huge. An issue of Avengers where the Avengers fight the Thanos space fleet, again, which is not like necessarily directly essential to it. And I think maybe 1 or 2 other issues that I might be missing. Basically, the Avengers vs. Thanos collects pieces of both of these books, as well as some cross-Avengers stuff that comes together in the Thanos conflict, and there it is. You have it right there. These books instead kind of collect the full run on Captain Marvel that Jim Starlin had, the full run on Warlock that Jim Starlin had. So even if Thanos is not necessarily in every page of this, I find it to be a better reading experience to go through and kind of read these as 2 different pieces, because more or less this is kind of the first half of the classic Thanos saga, and this is kind of the second half of the classic Thanos saga. So more or less by reading these 2 things, I think you're going to get a great picture of the classic Thanos saga. Avengers vs. Thanos will pad it out a little bit, or you could just get it if you wanted kind of the core just Thanos stuff. But for my money, I would say that getting these 2 complete collections is the best way to go. There is also another alternative, and that is to bring into play this bad boy, the Guardians of the Galaxy Solo Classic Omnibus, because this does have the Thanos stuff in it from Avengers vs. Thanos. It's just missing some other side stuff. I'm sorry, I know that this is a pain. That's why I think that this is a kind of a problematic way of collecting, because Marvel has not done a good job of putting this together. What they could do, what I would love to see, is like a classic Thanos Saga Omnibus, or like a Jim Starlin classic Cosmic Omnibus, something that gets it all together in one place, because they haven't done a good job of that. This is oversized. These are standard size. And in this book, there are a number of issues. There are some of the Captain Marvel issues. There are some of the Warlock issues from this trade, as well as some of the Avengers Crossed issues. And then this also collects a number of other, cosmic stuff outside of Starlin's realm, which, again, this book is very true to its name in that it just focuses on the Guardians themselves. So if there's not a Guardian appearing in some way, shape, or form in the comic, it ain't going to be in this book. So when I was reading this personally, I kind of ping-ponged between read some of this, and read some of it in here, whenever I could, reading the oversized, pages in there, and then when I couldn't, picking it up in trade and reading it through here. It is a pain, frankly, that Marvel has not done a better job collecting this. But it is all available and in print for not too much money, should you desire to track it down yourself. It's just going to mean buying multiple books and not having as easy access to something in a one-stop shop. So while these editions are all nice, like this is a really nice omnibus, it's nice and thick and well put together. These are nice, thick, complete collection trades. Nothing that you're buying is of shoddy product and material. It's just a pain that you have to get either 3 different trades or maybe 2 trades in an Omni. It's just a pain that you have to do all those things just to read this one complete classic Thanos Starlin saga. And you might be asking, well, Will, why would I go through that pain to read this material? And I would say to you, because it's fucking awesome, okay? This is some tight, fucking cool shit. Like I said, Jim Starlin came on as a young guy, kind of had control of this stuff. And I'm going to talk about script first before I talk about art. The writing in here is really pretty good. I like a lot of the stuff that Starlin does, especially a lot of the themes, I think, are expansive, really make you think. It's a lot about cosmic consciousness, metamorphosis, rebirth. A lot of the themes that I'm quite, partial to. I think they are interesting and elevate kind of the normal 70s writing above, or they elevate themselves above it, rather. Especially, there's an issue or two of Captain Marvel in here where Captain Marvel becomes cosmically aware. I believe it's issue 28. That is fantastic. It's so good. Starlin does an amazing job of taking these 2 characters, Captain Marvel, who existed for a while as a Kree soldier, and then eventually turned into a good guy, and then during the course of Starlin's run turns into this like truly powerful, cosmic, omnipotent hero. And Starlin does an amazing job of changing him and bringing him to that point and kind of putting him through trials, similar with Warlock. Adam Warlock existed, I think Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created him in the Fantastic Four as this character just called Him, this kind of cocoon-born fake human person, meant to be like the best of humanity, but kind of turns out to see how terrible humanity is that created him. Similarly, Starlin puts him through the damn ringer in this series of books, has awful things happen to him, makes him come face to face with the ugliness of his own soul and of people around him, and has him emerge on the other side as being a stronger, more aware of the truth, somebody who's seeking kind of a higher purpose in life. And both of these stories have a similar feel to them in that sense, where Starlin takes a character, breaks them down, and brings them into the higher understanding and existence. And it's really cool to read. I think he does a great job of creating that saga. And his Thanos is also a really cool character. He writes Thanos particularly well, I think, because he comes off, especially in the Warlock runs, when you get into the second half of this kind of classic Thanos saga, and you have Thanos pitted against Warlock, he really plays on this duality of Thanos being obsessed with death and the order of death, kind of the order of an empty universe, how nothing can go wrong, everybody can be at peace, everything can be controlled by the extermination of the universe. Whereas Warlock kind of goes through all these terrible things in his life, understands and sees firsthand the chaos of life, but still is somebody who will accept what it means to be alive, even with the pain that comes with it. And so it's a really interesting duality when you pit Warlock and Thanos against each other, having this person who, rejects control and maybe not thrives on chaos, understands that it's painful, but realizes that is the true nature of the world, versus Thanos, this person who, embraces control and feels as though the nature of the universe is to be at, order and peace and rest and entropy and zero. So it's a really cool story. In terms of the technical writing, I think the technical writing is pretty good. There are no times when I thought, this is terrible, this is awful. The one thing that I had a hard time getting behind is that Starlin is very fond of refreshing readers as to what is going on in the current comic. And this current series and the comic before it, there's a lot of backtracking. A lot of times what he'll do is just do text dumps along with like a particularly large picture that kind of illustrates the whole thing. It became tiresome to me reading it in this trade form. I understand that in the 70s, these comics were not collected as trades. The idea would be that you would get a comic off the shelf, and maybe you hadn't read the one before, and maybe you won't read the one after. So you need some kind of understanding of what's going on to make, especially something like this where it is serialized, a story that's serialized all the way through. I get that. I get that these weren't meant to be read as trades originally, but I still feel, even with that, there is a lot of rehashing, and it can become tiresome. Sometimes the characters will pop out of the side of the comic and be like, hey guys, remember what was going on last time? And then give you a page or two of exposition. You can safely skip that anytime you see it, because although there are some cool art, moments related to it, it never pushes the story forward at all. There's also moments of just kind of internal monologues where, Warlock or Marvel will be somewhere and they'll just kind of sit down and be like, how did I get here? And then go through this whole thing like, then I did this, then this happened, then I met her, then I went here. And that, again, I feel like as a storytelling device just kills the momentum of the story. It's kind of painful to get through. But it's skippable if you really don't like it. And if you do enjoy that kind of 70s, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, see the last issue sort of vibe to it, then this will be a nice throwback of nostalgia to you. So I think it is of its time in the technical execution, but I do think in the themes and concepts, it exceeds a lot of the stuff that was going on around it. It really is a strong philosophical and thematic run. And that brings us to the art. The art is awesome in these books. It's across the board fantastic. Starlin does a number of these issues completely by himself, pencils, inks, writing, everything. He does some of the earlier issues scripted by some other people. I think while he's kind of getting a hand on how he would script and tell his own stories, he just does the pencils and inks on some of it. Some of the later issues when he does scripting and just layouts, and then other artists do the finished art. So it's all over the place in terms of what Starlin is actually, putting pen to paper. When he's doing it on which issue, it actually varies a lot. But universally, when he's doing layouts or finishes himself, it is awesome. I think his layout style is great. I've read little snippets with him where he talks about how Steve Ditko is his favorite, ultimate kind of constructor of cosmic and psychedelic spaces, and he totally goes with the Ditko thing, leans strong into it. There's, full panels. I think there's actually an issue in here that's dedicated to Steve Ditko, and there's full, pages at a time when he takes almost, it's so close to what Ditko was doing in Doctor Strange. He basically pays homage / rips it off to the kind of like spaces in between reality and the way that it looks, the crazy shapes and perspectives that are going on. It's awesome. And I do like all that stuff, but I think where it really shines is when Starlin takes it in his own direction and kind of puts these huge backdrops of space and the cosmos and the kind of like bigger emptiness of the universe. In that sense, it feels like he got that almost a little bit more from somebody like Jack Kirby, where, a lot of his cosmic stuff, nobody draws space quite like Jack Kirby with all the Kirby crackle and the huge planets and everything. It sort of feels like it's a meshing together of a few of those things where It's a bit of Ditko's kind of mentality with how you're putting together the composition for a panel, and it's a bit of kind of the Kirby power and just awesome, awesome in a literal sense, awesome visuals of space and the universe and stuff. And then also it has what I would call, a bit of the Steranko influence in the way that he lays it out. A lot of the page layouts themselves have bits of, interesting or innovative different panel structures, or, have characters popping in and out to kind of explain stuff to you, or kind of take up half of the page. It definitely feels like he is at this point, and, this was the 70s, so obviously 76, 77, 78, all of that stuff had already happened, 10 years ago, where Ditko and Kirby and Steranko were doing their work. And I think that Starlin is a really, really cool, at this point in time, in the mid to late 70s, he's a really cool amalgamation of all of those guys. And especially if you like the whole, cosmic stuff, if you enjoyed what Jack Kirby did with Silver Surfer and Galactus and things like that, this will definitely scratch that itch. I think it's just absolutely fantastic in that sense. Some of the coloring is a little weird. This run includes the Captain Marvel, the Death of Captain Marvel graphic novel, if you choose to collect the trade paperback. Starlin, basically more or less has a complete Thanos Saga, which finishes in, I believe, 77 or 78. And then he comes back to the character of Captain Marvel in 1982 to write this really heartfelt, really well done original graphic novel. It was actually the first Marvel graphic novel, which is called The Death of Captain Marvel. And the art is a little wonky. I don't know, some of the coloring, I'm not sure if it was the kind of the attempt of them to do the higher quality European style graphic album stuff, but the art looks a little washed out and faded. It doesn't look as strong and kind of pop and have the same power that it did, in the mid 70s when he was doing this monthly stuff. It's still good. Actually, I think probably The Death of Captain Marvel is one of the stronger written pieces of superhero fiction that I can think of that I've read recently. It has a lot of real heart and interest in exploring what it means for a character to pass away in this universe in a way that I think is not always explored when you have things like the death of Superman and the death of Wolverine, and they're going to come back, in the next 10 issues or whatever. It's not like that. It has kind of a sense of finality and, real sadness to it, and I really liked it a lot. I think that it's, like I said, it's one of the best dealings of superhero death that I can remember reading, especially from, Marvel or DC. I'm sure there's lots of smaller comics or things that I don't know about that, focus on the death of superheroes, but in terms of the mainstream Big Two stuff, the Death of Captain Marvel is one that I think really lives up to, the hype that it gets. So ultimately what I'm getting at is I can't recommend this stuff enough. The classic Thanos Saga is so cool. Thanos and these characters were thrown together for a number of years, and actually when the saga wraps up in the later 70s, Thanos comes back for a brief period in the Death of Captain Marvel stuff, but after that, he was basically just wiped away off the table until the Infinity Gauntlet stuff happened again. So it definitely is something that you can read this classic saga, have a good understanding of Thanos, and then jump into Infinity Gauntlet and onwards. And I think it really helps flesh out the whole idea of the character, to see what the genesis was in the mind of Jim Starlin when he was kind of at this really strong creative place in the mid 70s, where these characters came from in his psyche and why he pitted them against each other. I think it's an excellent series. I can't recommend it enough. The collecting of it is a bit wishy-washy, depending on how exactly you want to fill up your collection with trades and or omnis, and how much overlap and double dip you want. That's a pain. It sucks. I wish Marvel had a solution to this that was better. But if you're willing to buy a couple books, I think you will more than get your money's worth on this run, because it really is a fantastic piece of 70s cosmic storytelling. And one that I've really enjoyed. So thank you guys for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you check out these books. And I hope you get in touch with me about independent comic work or any type of comic work if you have stuff you would like to send to the channel to have evaluated, featured, reviewed, critiqued, all that stuff. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.